Welcome to Money Metaphors, exploring financial concepts through stories and analogies, with Jason Coddington from Coddington Wealth Advisors. In this podcast, we help families and small business owners like you navigate the world of finance. Our goal? To help you stress less and enjoy life more, all while leaving a lasting legacy. Join us for this journey where we explore the nuances of goal-based asset management, retirement, and estate planning strategies as Jason and his team draw from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the puzzle of effective financial management.
And welcome to the Money Metaphors podcast with your host, Jason Coddington. Jason, good to be with you again. So what's in store for the listeners this week?
Well, I think this week we're going to tackle college education planning. And so college's planning is an important topic for most individuals we work with. And most people today find that it's probably one of the most expensive financial things in their lifetime. You know, there's purchasing a home, there's retiring, but college is right up there. And so we want to empower people to have the resources to not only save for college education, but save on college education. So that's what's in store today.
Good. I'm looking forward to that conversation. As somebody who is looking at college education for his kids in the rearview mirror, I'm probably going to hear a lot of things that I wish I'd known beforehand, but lead us on, Jason.
Yeah. So I think, there's just some crazy stats out there, right? So in the last, 15 years or so, there's been a 330% increase in student loan debt. In the last 10 years, a 4-year in-state tuition has increased 23%, and then there's this whole thing about, many parents just think their kid's going to get a free ride. Well, 0.3% of students get a free ride.
Just to be clear, that's less. That's a third of 1%.
Yeah.
One third of 1%. Not
a whole lot. So, every little league field in America, thinks that their kid's going to go be a D1 grad, and that just it's not normal. So we have to plan for that. And so there's a lot of, and I think the other thing is that what most people discount when they look at planning for college is the impact it can have on planning for retirement, because if you don't do it appropriately, it'll take resources away from planning for retirement and delay that for individuals and families. And so, we see that. So, we see planning for college education, most parents want to be the heroes to their kids and help provide them with an education for their future. And that's noble. But at the same, time, they need some guidance, and we want to be that guide to help them be the heroes to their kids. And so that's what we want to embark on today through some strategies. And to do that, I've invited a guest, Roger Lorelle with Collegiate Funding Solutions, and he will help explore some of these topics in more detail so that when you get done with this podcast, you're an empowered, informed buyer of college education.
Excellent. Well, let's get on. I'm all ears.
So in that regard, I've asked the guest speaker to come on today to talk about some of the ways to save on college education. And his name is Roger Lorelle, and he is associated with Collegiate Funding Solutions. So we thank you, Roger, for joining us, and he's going to have a dialogue with us and tell us a little about yourself. And, you're also a parent of some students going through this, so it's not just theoretical for you. So go ahead and let us know, Roger, how you might be able to help us today and a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thank you, Jason, for inviting me to participate in your podcast here. It's my pleasure to join your audience today and to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart in a couple of different ways. First of all, as the president of this company, Collegiate Funding Solutions, we've been around for over 20 years now, providing our clients are primarily financial advisors and financial organizations. Of course, it's people like yourself that are dealing with families on all sorts of financial matters, probably mostly retirement planning, but as we're going to get deeper and deeper into this, college and retirement are very integrally connected. And so, but what we essentially have been doing for many years is providing advisors with capability and support, resources, education to help their clients save on, and not just for the cost of a college education. So that's sort of our mission as a company. Our guiding principle here, again, it's been the same for over 20 years, helping families save on and not just for the cost of college, because the big issue that we discovered many years ago is not so much saving for college, which most people weren't doing anyway, but was finding a way to control the cost of colleges. The cost of a college education would consistently and relentlessly go up and up and up, and people were under more and more pressure to cover the cost of a college education without compromising all their other financial goals, right? In other words, without going broke in the process. Pay for college without going broke in the process. And that has just become a bigger and more compelling issue over the years. And so our mission is to help families sort of avoid that very difficult situation by empowering them with the information, actionable information they need to become what we call informed buyers of a college education. So I think to some extent what we can do here in terms of helping folks move the ball forward a little bit is helping them become better informed buyers of a college education. Apart from being the owner of this company and all that goes along with that, I'm also a parent. I've got 5 kids. My oldest is a senior in high school. And so I am seeing this whole paying for college and sending a child off to college from a whole different light. It's much more personal to me now than it ever was before. And I can understand why so many people, especially when the kids get into the later years of high school, are feeling such tremendous pressure. And unfortunately, it's a lot worse than it was when I was going through college. I mean, there's so much pressure on kids and families to go to college and get a college education. And again, it's just a difficult situation and time for many families. And so we're feeling that as well. I guess the good news for us is I don't feel like I'm going into this thing blindly. I feel very at peace with what we're going to be able to do, be informed buyers of a college education and get the best possible deal for my daughter and for our finances. So that's a little bit about me and my business and personal situation.
Yeah, good deal. Well, thank you. And I didn't mention that earlier. I'm kind of in the throes of it as well. I have a daughter who graduated from Fresno State, and she's now a second grade teacher, which is great. And she was a swimmer, so she was an athlete. So we know what that experience is like. And she went to first private and then transferred to public education. And then I have a daughter that's at Point Loma, which is a private school in San Diego currently. She's in her senior year, and totally different experience, not an athlete, small school, great experience there. That campus, of course, is beautiful right in San Diego. And then I have a son who's a junior in high school. So we're kind of going through it all over again, because you're kind of, junior year for all college is that's where everything really kind of amps up. So it's not unique. So again, but enough about us. I think, probably we'll start talking about some strategies to help. One thing I want to make sure we address today, it doesn't have to be the first thing, is there's some upcoming changes in 2023 that some families should be aware of. And I want to make sure we address, and that's has to do with, if you own a business, do those assets count or do they not count? And then, of course, the multiple children, you having 5, me, of course, having the 3, but, 2 might be in at the same time still. You might lose. There's an adjustment. It used to get a credit for having multiple children in college, and that's kind of gone away. So I want to make sure we talk about that. But what would you say is the number one thing to start with if you're going to look at saving on college, on the cost of college?
That's a great question. I think it's a philosophical thing. I think people have to understand the relationship between the college, which is the seller of an education, and the parent or and the family that are buyers of a college education. It's really no different than any other sort of buyer-seller arrangement where somebody's selling something. In this case, it's college education, and somebody's buying something. In this case, it's buying the college education. So you got the buyers and the sellers. And generally, when you're looking at a very expensive purchase, people want to be very educated about what they can do to control the cost of whatever that purchase is. It's just a weird thing when it comes to college. And I'm not sure I exactly know what the reason for this is, but people go into it very blindly. They just think that, college is something that they're going to have to bite the bullet and, pay whatever they can. Some people will look at this in terms of, what they can afford, but we already know that a lot of people go way beyond their means. And that's why we have so much student loan debt, right? So I think the first thing is just a general understanding that, you're a buyer, and the more informed that you can be about what you can do to control the costs. And there are many things. We've been doing these things again for over 20 years. The more empowered you're going to be, and the more you're going to stack the deck in your favor to get the best possible outcome for your student. And that's, a college that's going to be very happy going to and pursuing a program that makes sense for them. but also from the parent's standpoint, not paying one nickel more than you absolutely have to. And most people can't say that. And that's what we want to help people to be able to do. So again, I think the number one thing is understanding that buyer-seller arrangement.
Yeah, because it's interesting because you go through school, it's, a K-12. If you go public, of course, in California, you pay through property tax if they're going to public education. But, the point there is you're not really doling out additional money for school. So you're a buyer, but you kind of it's an intangible buyer. Whereas when it comes for college, you actually are. So you have to switch your hat and reframe your mind, because most education the entire life has been, quote unquote, not necessarily directly out of your pocket, indirectly through property taxes, if that makes sense.
Well, even private schools, like, for example, my kids go to private high school, and there aren't that many in our area, right? This isn't like going to college where you've got essentially the whole country as potential options. Right now, you may not choose to pursue those options, but one thing that we may get into here is that and maybe I'll just go ahead and jump into it right now, since we're sort of going down this road. So my kids go to a private high school. I can't leverage other private high schools against the high school that my kids go to in order to get a better deal. It doesn't work that way when you send your kids to secondary or high schools. But it absolutely can work that way for colleges, because there are many, many colleges around the country. And again, I'm going to stick to the buyer and the seller. There are many, many colleges across the country that have been described as buyers. In fact, there's some excellent research that has been done over the last couple of years exactly doing that, designating colleges as buyers and sellers. Well, what does one mean versus the other? Buyer colleges are colleges that need students to attend there in order to meet their enrollment goals, right? And financially, it's important for them to attract these kids because of the numbers that are applying, because of the numbers that are accepting, and because of the numbers that are actually attending those schools. They are willing to, and they have enrollment managers that have all this specialized expertise that lets them know what it's going to cost to buy students, to get them there, either through financial aid or, more importantly, through what's called tuition discounts. Those are scholarships. They'll attract families and kids to come to those schools because it's a lot cheaper for a school to give up, let's say, $10,000 to $15,000 a year to a family to get their student there than it is to not have the student there at all. They're going to lose a lot more money than they're giving up. So that's a little insight that people probably didn't even have any idea that actually occurs. But
that's not common knowledge. So and we have the resources, of course, for that, right?
Well, 100%. It's one of the things that because that is a fact. You can take that information and you can run with it if you have access to the data. So one of the things that you want to know, and again, I'm going to make this personal here. One of the things that you want to know, let's say if you got a junior or senior in high school, is you want to know what schools are the buyers and which ones are the sellers. Think of the sellers as like the Ivy League schools, right? They don't care if your kid comes there, or they're getting so many more applicants than they're going to take, right? And they get a high percentage of kids that get accepted that end up coming there. They don't have to give out much what we call merit money or tuition discounting to get students to attend those schools. But the reality is those schools are a fraction of the total number. I don't know offhand what's the total number of colleges across the country. We sort of keep track with about 1,800 these are 4-year nonprofit institutions. And there's probably, 2,500 colleges across the country, right? 85 to 90% of them or more are buyers. Now, we're at a point at time in the landscape where the informed buyer of a college education has never been in a better position. Because if you can identify these schools, they may either be schools that could be a great fit for the student, or they could potentially be used as a bargaining chip. And I'll take that one step a little bit further. My daughter, who I've tried to explain this to a little bit, I've explained to her, I said, hey, Catherine, look, we're going to be applying to maybe 15 colleges. And a lot of these schools are not going to be schools you're really going to be interested in going to. But I am strategically identifying those schools for us as a family, because among one thing, I know those are schools that we are going to get a generous award from, right? Because we're going to take all these different awards that we're going to get from these colleges that you're going to get admitted to, and we're going to start to leverage these things against the schools that you really want to go to. And there's a whole process for doing that. I mean, this stuff has been done for many years by practitioners who know what they're doing, right? Who have been doing this type of thing for families for many years. It may not be widely known, but trust me, people in the know have been doing this stuff for years. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And I think it's exactly what your listeners ought to at least be considering. And if that idea, and I think for most people, that concept does make sense to them. right? I mean, we do that kind of we have that kind of approach in a lot of things that we might by buying a car, perhaps, right? You go if you're playing one dealer off of another, you got an offer from one, you can take that to the other and say, look, I really want this one, but here's the offer that I've got in paper. It's right here. Can you beat this deal? And if they want your business, they're going to look, hold on a second, let me go talk to the manager. And they're going to come back and say, well, I'll be darned. You know what? We can beat that deal. It's amazing how they can come up with ways to get a better deal when they know they might lose you otherwise.
Yeah. And I think that's a great perspective, because I think what's happened as far as college education planning historically is, you open up a savings account, you open up a 529 account or a Coverdell savings account, and you just put money away, and you get to your, 18 years of age, and you have some money, and then you go to school. Right. I mean, but so that's where a lot of the focus has been. But these, initially the strategy of one, knowing that you're a buyer, and two, knowing that you have leverage is very important. And I think at the end of this podcast, we're going to be sharing one of the takeaways for the audience is there's going to be a link where you'll be able to go access some information and compare colleges and look at different schools, a lot of different resources there. So that's, we'll have that for you as well. One thing I wanted to talk about, you talked about getting into school. Just yesterday, this was published by AP, and there's a student here in California. His name is Stanley Zong. Okay. So he had an unweighted GPA of 3.97 and a weighted GPA of 4.42, which means, he had some AP classes in there, and he scored a 1590 out of 1600 on the SATs. So this is just merit, right? He was rejected 16 out of 18 colleges, Stanford, Cal, UCLA. The crazy thing about it, as the story goes, Google ended up hiring him. So that's a whole other, but I mean, the point is, this guy had stacked the deck academically, and apparently, he was not looking he was looking at admission. I'm sure he could have gotten some money. But even then, with those kind of statistics, you would think you'd get in any school in the country, and it's just not that easy.
Yeah, well, I don't know the facts of that case or anything, but let me just make some sort of general comments about that. All right, that GPA is a good GPA, but you can almost take GPAs and throw them out the window now, because tons of kids have 4.0, right? It's not hard to have a 4.0 GPA or even a little higher than that, and the SAT score very good. However, if this kid's applying to Stanford and Princeton and Cal Tech and these elite schools, all those kids have super high SAT scores, right? In other words, what potentially was happening here is this kid's applying to all these seller schools, right? And he's not applying to any buyer schools at all. And so that, perhaps that's what's going on there. Again, I don't know any more about the facts of the case and, why he was being rejected these schools, but I can tell you that what I sort of set out here at the beginning of our conversation about, at a minimum, make sure you're identifying schools that want your student to attend. So let me go ahead and just broaden that a little bit in terms of this approach that parents need to take, right? And that is, making sure that you're identifying schools ahead of time. And this is planning, right? You don't wait until it's your kid's senior high school to be doing this stuff. You can be doing this stuff in the earlier years. And depending on the kind of planning that you're doing, Jason, some of it should be done by the time your kid's a sophomore in high school. And all this ties into the FAFSA that we're going to get into in just a minute. But just from the standpoint of, identifying schools that are a good fit for the student, you should be looking at schools where you have some idea that your student is going to be sort of more towards the top of the applicant pool at that school. Some people use 25%. We typically look at the 20% cutoff in terms of identifying schools where not only is your kid very likely to get admitted to that university, but they're very likely to get money from the school, right? So they want kids that are at the top of the applicant pool. And again, because so many of these schools are buyer schools, that doesn't mean the kid has to have a 1500 on his SAT. Most kids don't have a 1500 on their SAT, right? I don't know what the average is. I think the national average on the ACT is around a 19. And that probably equates to, I don't know, maybe a little over 1,000 on the SAT score. So you should have some idea as families are doing their evaluation, finding schools that are going to want their student to attend. All right. And again, those are schools where the kids are going to be more towards the top of the applicant pool. You need resources. Again, and this is where analytics and having access into the tools, certainly the kind of tools that we provide, answer these kinds of questions, because we know that those things are fundamental to helping families achieve a good outcome, right? Make sure you're at least identifying schools for consideration where the student is going to be more towards the top of the applicant pool. So
Good deal. So the two real, I know we got maybe some time constraints here, but we want to tackle at least two more things. And for sure, one of them would be the FAFSA. And then the other would be, of course, this whole topic about, because I believe my personal experience with my daughter that went to Point Loma is she had taken the ACT, exam, and, Point Loma was really good. They had a GPA across the top and then an ACT score or SAT score on the side. You just follow that grid. And when you follow that grid, it would say, all right, well, based on this is the amount of age you will likely get. Well, we didn't see that till later, but, just an extra 5 points, could have separated us from, maybe a few $1,000s for saving on education. So I think what's happened lately is some people say, well, the SAT and ACT don't count anymore. Well, they absolutely count for money. And for a kid to, spend time studying, I think, again, that's not the only way, but that can help. Can you comment a little bit about GPA, weighted GPA, and the combination of that with SAT and ACT?
Yeah, I can talk about it from my own fatherly perspective for a daughter that's going through this. Okay. First thing I will say is that my colleagues who really live in this world of the admissions and the impact of test scores on money. Okay. They've said for the last few years when they went to test optional, just because it's optional doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I told my daughter, I said, look, Catherine, if you're not submitting your SAT scores, it probably means you're not real proud of what the scores are. Right? I mean, come on, otherwise you're going to be submitting your scores to a school. It may not have anything to do with whether you're getting admitted or not, because the reality is that less and less kids are submitting their scores, and the ones who are have higher scores. Right? So and you can get this data from the schools, and you'll see this. The range on their SATs might be like 29 to 33 or 34 on the kids submitting their scores. So it doesn't mean if you don't submit your test scores, you're not going to get into the school, because obviously if only a handful of kids, if let's say 200 out of 1,000 that were admitted are submitting their test scores, well, obviously 800 kids still got into the school, right? But it all comes down to who's getting the money, who's getting the merit from these colleges, right? And we're in the business of helping people save on, not just for the cost of college, who are getting the better financial aid packages, all right? They're going to be the kids that are submitting their test scores where they're in the money at that school. And in fact, this is something else that people can know ahead of time. Again, I want to put in a little plug for your capability because we provided it to you. And that is, a family should have an idea ahead of time as to where they kind of sit in the applicant pool at a school, so they can know, hey, are we going to be likely in the money at a school based on our students' GPA and SAT scores? And if we're short, and this is what happened in our case, if our child is a little bit short, how far short are we of really getting into the money at that school? And if it's something that's a very reasonable amount, you might consider test prep. And that's what we did. We went the route, but it was a very intelligent, informed approach to doing it. Most people have no idea whether or not the test prep that they're engaged in is going to help or not. And it's going to be predicated on a number of variables. And one of those variables is what schools are you looking at? And what's the threshold? I mean, what's the benchmark here that we got to get to? It may be too far, right? It may be you're looking at a school where a kid's got to raise his, let's say, his SAT score by 300 points. That's a big ask. And I don't think most kids are going to be able to do that, right? So just going into this informed and with knowledge ahead of time just allows families to make better informed decisions. Now, they may just say, hey, after all is said and done, we just set on X, Y, at this particular school, and we're just going to pay whatever it takes, and that's the end of it. Well, so be it. At least they had access to the information necessary to make an informed decision, whether they choose to act on that information or not. That is completely up to them. But I would think from your standpoint as an advisor, since you're dealing with people on financial matters, there's no one else helping people do this stuff, Jason. They're not going to go to their guidance counselor in their high school. They're not going to go to a college admissions consultant. None of these people have any specialized expertise on the affordability aspect of college. In other words, none of them have that as a primary objective, right? And that's why ideally this sort of help should come through the financial advisor, because they're already looking at consequential financial matters like retirement. And because college and retirement are so connected, anything an advisor can do to help clients save $1 on college is $1 that could go into the retirement. And people are definitely not killing it on the retirement savings, are they? You tell me.
No, the national rate's pretty low. So, yeah.
So, anything that you can do to help people from an advisor standpoint is really very important.
And that kind of brings me, to there's a stat here is, after 4 years of public education in the average in the United States, the parents typically have 29,500 of debt. The student has about 25,500 of debt. So between the family, that's another 43,000. That's per kid. That's per child. So we want to definitely help alleviate that. I appreciate what you said. Yes, of course, we're going to have some resources here for that, for college education, so people can, go to our website, click the link, and they can go in there and search. They can search by state. They can play with, what if my GPA increases? What if my SAT score increases or ACT score increases, and then where that puts them. So it's a great resource we'll have at the end of this call. Tell us a little bit about, because I have this question as well for myself, because we were affected by it. So when both daughters were in college at the same time, one was a freshman, one was a senior, we got a little help because on the economic family contribution that's required, the EFC, which is a common term clients should know, we got a little help because we had two in school at the same time. And one of the crazy things is now, and you'll just kind of tee this up for you to talk about the new changes coming, but that's going away. So it might be harder, or the economic family contribution might be higher. So let's talk about some of those changes that are coming in 2024, because that's for parents that are, for juniors right now, juniors, seniors, it might be for seniors, it's definitely too late. For juniors, sophomores, and freshmen, parents in high school, definitely appropriate to have this conversation. So
thanks for bringing that up. I recently hosted an educational webinar titled, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." A little takeoff on Charles Dickens. And the overarching point I think that I made in that webinar is that for those that are informed and know what's going on and how to capitalize on opportunities, it can be the best of times. Much of this ties into what I said on the beginning here. There's never been a better time for people to get a great deal. One thing we didn't even get into was there's this declining pool of candidates for college. I mean, there's less kids applying to go to college. All right. So there's there's a lot of demographic components and things happening in the landscape, again, that put people in a great position if they know what they're doing. All right. The problem is for the uninformed buyer of a college education, in light of changes that have been made by the Department of Education, they've been coming down the pike for 2 or 3 years now. They finally went into effect. For people that don't know what the changes are and how they can impact them, many of them there's going to be some wailing and gnashing of teeth, I guess is a certain way to put it. All right. We can go through what some of those key changes are. And maybe the first one is one that you just sort of mentioned. So let me bring it up. Every family, by the way, let me just make a comment to your audience. I don't care if you're listening and you're making $8 million a year, or you're making $80,000 a year. Every single family should file the FAFSA. And I don't have the time to go deep into that. Get with Jason. He can explain to you why that is. All right. If you want a great deal, it might seem counterintuitive, but perhaps even the more money you're making, the more incumbent it is on you to file the FAFSA. People typically thought in the past that FAFSA was just for, need-based financial aid. That's not true. All right. So assume everybody's going to file the FAFSA that has a college-bound senior. They made some big changes. And for many years, for over 20 years prior to the change, families that had more than one child in college at the same time got a discount. In other words, their family contribution to a particular college was cut in half. All right. So they would submit their FAFSA form. They would get a calculated assessment. Let's say that assessment was $50,000. If they had two kids in college at the same time, one going to Point Loma, is that the name of the school that you're?
Yeah.
Point Loma.
Fresno State. Yeah.
In Fresno State, right? So instead of it being $50K per kid, it was $25,000 per kid. All right. They took away the discount. This is the most significant and I would say hurtful change that was made. This is going to impact most families because most families, at least the ones that I know, and it certainly applies to my family, our kids are not 4 years apart. They're generally a couple, maybe 3 years apart. Sometimes you got one stacked right after the other, right? So this is a huge impact for families. Now, that's for the people who, have no idea that this has changed. Maybe it is what it is for them because they never knew it was any other way. For those who already have kids in college, they might be in for a real rude awakening at the college their kids are going to when they get their next financial aid package. This is all sort of going to be playing out over time. to see how colleges are going to handle situations where the kids are already in school. But I want to talk to the people whose kids are going to be going to college. There are ways to get around this. There are, let's say, about 200 colleges across the country that, based on the best information we have available right now, they're still going to offer the student discount. They're still going to offer the discount when you have multiple kids in college at the same time. And you just have to know what those colleges are. Those are colleges that I know that you can tell people, who could reach out to the resources that you have. And so I know in our case as a family, because we'll have multiple kids in college, we're going to be certainly identifying and probably selecting colleges where we're going to get a discount, because we're going to have a lot of kids in college and we want to make sure we're getting the benefit of the discount. I think most families with multiple kids want to at least know what those schools are. And so my point here is that all hope is not lost, right? You just have to be an informed buyer and just simply have to know what those schools are that at least currently are going to offer that discount for multiple kids in college at the same time.
Yeah. There's some other changes. I know that so we're in a central California here. So we have a lot of farming families.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's talk about farmers.
Farmers and business. Yeah. Because there's
another huge change that is created a real outcry where you have farmers. It used to be that a family that had a working farm, in other words, they had a farm and they lived on that property, right, where they had the farm, the value of the farm was not assessed in the financial aid formula. So let's say, for example, this is going to be sort of like back of the napkin math here. Let's say their farm was valued at $1 million. All right. And there's an assessment in the formula that sort of decreases. They wouldn't have to pay that whole amount, but let's say it was the assessment was $500,000. All right. They were essentially not paying $30,000 a year because they weren't being assessed the value of their farm. All right. That was a $30,000 a year assessment that was not being applied to these farmers because the formulas were not assessing the value of their farm. Right. Now you add 30,000. That was on $500,000. Right. You add $30,000 a year of family contribution to, let's say the number's already 20, right? Now we're up to $50,000 a year of assessment. That's going to be devastating to many, if not most, farms, small farms. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be tough because we're in for most farms. If there are 20 acres here and they're 20,000 an acre. Just that alone, that's, and some parcels are bigger. We're in the, and that doesn't count the value of the house. If you add the house to that, you're easily going to clip over that $600,000.
Yeah, this is the thing. There is a workaround to this. I think probably because it does require a little bit more planning. The good news, just like, with the informed buyers, there are ways that families can avoid this. All right, that are not going to be generally known. But the bad news is that they're going to assess farms and they're also assessing small businesses. Now, it used to be because you got a lot of small business owners.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
The way that it worked is if your business employed less than 100 employees under the old formula, the net worth of your business was not assessed. Well, that's changed. They did away with that, just like on the farm side, they did away with it. So there's a little bit of a assessment rate for the business, but still, it's being counted. And what I think is so unfair about that is, look, let's say you got a farm that's what's that tied into? Machinery, combines, tractors. How are you going to leverage that to pay for college? This is not access. How are you going to access these resources to pay for college? Even if you have let's say you've got a print shop. You're a small, closely held business. You run a print shop or something like that, or you're a tailor, whatever the case may be. That's not available cash for you to pay for college. It's not like money sitting in a savings account, right? So what's going to happen, I think, at a practical level for a lot of these people that don't know what they can do to avoid these situations that are going to be very punitive, they're going to send their kids to lesser colleges, or they're going to take out more student loan debt. And that's not only been a problem in the past, but that's becoming a bigger problem because interest rates have gone up, right? So you have all these different factors that are conspiring. That's why it's never been more important to know what the heck you're doing here. There's way too much at stake for families to go into this thing blindly, like 90% of Americans are doing. Maybe it's 95%. And they're just going to get what they get. In other words, they're going to fill out the FAFSA. They're going to get an award letter back from a couple of schools. And they're going to say, now, how in the world are we going to pay for this? That is how people have been paying for college for too many years here in this country. That's how it's been working. right?
Yeah.
Wait until they get, there's no tactical planning ahead of time. And perhaps, again, it's because people had no earthly idea there was another way. And if we've done anything in this podcast, it was to inform people, though there is another way. And for those of you that want to apply a little bit of effort in figuring out what the workarounds are, they're there. And, you can probably get a fantastic outcome if you pursue some of these lines of attack.
Yeah. And we'll have some resources for that at the end or at the links in the show. So that's good. I think one kind of to wrap it up, I've always said when someone asks, Jason, what's college planning? How do you describe it? And I said, and this is kind of a bad analogy maybe, but again, it's money metaphors is the title. So I'm coming up with something, but no, this is and also too, because I do it. So I don't know if you've ever reverse seared a steak, but that's where you cook it slow and low for a period of 30, 40 minutes. And you can do that on a grill. You can do that in an oven. You can do that, or you can do it in sous vide, you can, which is like a lot of, high class restaurants do. But at the very end, you sear it, you just seal in everything. And then, been to a Ruth Chris steakhouse, you've been to a fancy steakhouse, they bring it on a plate and it's sizzling. That's technically what they're doing there. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make that's college education, because so between ages 0 and about 18 to 22, you're saving, you're slow cooking, right? You're putting money away, you're accumulating resources. But then you get to this last few years just before the kids go to school, and now you have to sear it. You got to turn up the heat and you got to sear the steak and, get it done. Or in this particular case, get the kids prepared for school. And what I don't think people are doing is, and we want to help them, we want to empower them. I'm very passionate about this, is inform people that, these few years before college, it's not always just about accumulating assets to pay for college. It's also strategies to save. So we want to, make sure people are empowered to do that. And so, but Bill, thanks for, coordinating this. And Roger, thanks so much for your communication today. And we probably could have another podcast just on the strategies, which we might do. I think another topic we might have soon would be one on college planning strategies for the small business owners. And we can do that and record that, because that's paying your kids and, is a unique strategy, and we want to have people leverage that. And that's a good way to save for college. And so, people are going to have to be creative and with these solutions that are now coming down the pike from the Department of Education. So, but thanks for being on, and thanks for, sharing all this. I know you have a lot of passion for it, and I know it's not theoretical because you've got the kids, you're in it. And so that's nice. So
if I would say one last thing, it would be that most people historically or typically have not thought of their advisor as the go-to person to help them with tactical college financial planning, which is really what we've been talking about here, right? They just think of their advisors, they're going to help me save for college. And saving is important. No one is saying you shouldn't be saving, but there's a lot more to it. And the good news is, at least for people listening to this podcast, that they have a resource through you, somebody they can go to that can actually help them in a way that really nobody else is going to help them, and not something that are really going to be able to DIY on their own. All right. It's a little bit too complicated. Just try and DIY your way to a great outcome. Right. And there's no need to have to do that either, if you have somebody that that you can go to and get some legitimate help from. So anyway, thanks again for having me on the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Roger, thank you very much. That was a very interesting conversation. And Jason, you're right. You could probably have 2 or 3 podcasts dealing with nothing but coping with college education, because it is an enormous expense. And unless you've dealt with it before, you almost can't imagine what it's going to do to your finances. I know you mentioned you're going to have some resources available, Jason. Where are those resources going to be, and how can people reach out to get a hold of you if they want to have a further conversation about this?
In the notes of this podcast, they'll be available. There'll be a link we have a whole page on our website dedicated to college education. And our website, of course, is www.coddingtonwealthadvisors.com. And you can access them there, and welcome to complete the information and go through it and, just explore the different, you can put different schools in there for your kids and just see what might be available. And if you have questions, then you give us a call, and we will help guide you through that. And if you want to sit down and dive into it further, we'll gladly help you do that.
Yeah, I think Roger made a really good point too, and I'll emphasize it as we're wrapping things up here. Most people have a financial advisor, do not think of financial advisors as a resource for this kind of stuff. They just, it's like, how do I get my investments in order? How do I get my savings in order? They don't think about going to their financial advisor going, I need some help. I got a 10-year-old kid at some point who's going to want to go to college. Can you help me sort this out, or can you give me some insight into it? So really helpful podcast. Thank you for facilitating that conversation. Really appreciate it. And viewers, of course, we thank you for listening. You heard how to get a hold of Jason. If you want to talk more about this, I encourage you to do so if you've got kids, because it's an important part of your life you need to plan for. On behalf of Jason and everybody at Coddington Wealth Advisors, I'm Bill Tucker, thanking you for listening and reminding you, don't wait. Go out and live your best life today.
Thank you for listening to Money Metaphors, exploring financial concepts through stories and analogies. Visit our website at www.coddingtonwealthadvisors.com or give us a call at 559-897-0040. Don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available.